The numbers are pretty large, but I think we can try to do the math here. Let's see. Ohio State beat Maryland by 59. Maryland beat Rutgers by 41. It's a nice even 100. We got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts to break down, maybe not necessarily the Rutgers game because that won't take a whole lot of time, but talk Ohio State football this week with the Scarlet Knights on tap in Piscataway. Pat, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing just fine. Before we get to the game, the scrimmage, whatever it turns out to be this Saturday, we will focus on Ohio State's effort against Maryland, which proved to be pretty much the same. The Terps would, based on their head-to-head with Rutgers, would apparently be much better than Rutgers, but their season has turned a very Rutgers-like fashion here in recent weeks after a nice little 2-game winning streak to start the season and a win against a top 15 Syracuse team at the time. But this was just the annihilation that we expected to be. I think the one play, Pat, that summarized the difference between the two teams and just what each team was playing for and kind of the ludicrous nature of the game was the onside kick that Chris Olave just kind of basket caught down the sideline that was just perfectly executed.
Ohio State could do whatever they wanted in this game, and I think that was pretty clear early on, and more or less what we expected when we spoke last week. You know, the Buckeyes were just better in every phase. I mean, they came out, they scored on the first 6 possessions of the game. The only reason they didn't score on the 7th was because the half ran out, and held Rutgers without a point in the first half. At the end of the first quarter, Rutgers had 1 total yard. I think they finished with finished the game with 139, but had like 60 some at halftime when the starters were still in. Ohio State pulled the starters to start the third quarter for the most part, at least all of them on offense. They kept a few defensive starters in, and still were able to hold Maryland or move the ball in Maryland, depending on which side of the ball you're talking about. The first Maryland touchdown anyway came on a penalty where 3 the Ohio State penalties, all by probably will take that as a learning experience, I imagine. Gave up a lot of field position there, but for the most part, Ohio State was pretty flawless throughout the game. Even when the backups came in offensively, they got down and scored 2 more touchdowns. With Chris Chung running the show, and Gunnar Hoke came in at the end. Only like 10 receivers caught passes. It was almost one of those games that you have in the non-conference to start the season where it's just going to be a demolition, and it is the Big Ten opponent. And I think it speaks not only to where Maryland is, but just how good Ohio State is. They went out and handled their business despite being ranked number 1. That didn't seem to affect them. Nothing seems to. So right now, Ryan Day's just got this team on a roll. They won't be tested again for weeks with, as you mentioned, Rutgers coming up. As long as you just keep looking the part, I think you still feel pretty good from an Ohio State perspective.
For the folks at Fox and just trying to keep viewers interested, the storyline of the Chase Young situation was what they gravitated to, of course, from 2 different angles. From the football angle, who's going to play in his place? How is that rotation going to look? How are those players? Are they playing at a dominant level? And just trying to focus in on his replacements and that profile. And then, of course, his situation and when he might be back. So first, let's attack, since we're already talking about the Maryland game and the dominance over the Terps, what you saw out of the defensive end position in Chase Young's absence.
Larry Johnson is, I think, unquestionably the top defensive line coach country. He's developed some very, very good players, now that are in the NFL, and Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Sam Hubbard, the list goes on. And you saw kind of the future of Ohio State's defensive line with Chase Young, not only Chase Young, but Jonathan Cooper, who is a senior who was out. It was certainly weird to not see Chase out there. He usually is one of the guys that leads the team out onto the field, but the likes of Zach Harrison, Tyler Friday, Tyreek Smith, and Javonte Jean-Baptiste were dominant. They didn't put up a ton of a fight in terms of the offensive line, but the team finished with 7 total sacks, 11 tackles for a loss. So we're able to get into the backfield. Really, really made life difficult for both Maryland quarterbacks, Josh Jackson and Tyrone Pigram. These guys, while they're not Chase Young by any stretch of the imagination, and they're certainly not finished products at this point, they showed that you can compete with these guys at a Big Ten level. We didn't think that the Chase Young absence would be much of an impact in this game. Probably won't next week if he misses that game, and that was the case here. So if there is a position like we talked about, I think last week, that Ohio State for to lose a player, it's probably on the defensive line. You don't want to see it, but they showed on Saturday that there's enough depth, enough talent at that position to almost not miss a beat. And it's scary to think what Chase Young would have done if he would have played, given what we saw 2 weeks ago in his last game against Wisconsin, when he had 4 sacks and 5 tackles for a loss. And that's a good Wisconsin offensive line.
The Buckeyes put up 73 against Maryland, the most by an Ohio State team against a Big Ten opponent since 1950. Buckeyes win it by 59. The point spread I see at 52 against Rutgers. I think that's just a guessing game by Vegas, not knowing what to put it on, because it could be anything that the Buckeyes would like it to be based on just the performance of the two teams. Obviously, we got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts. We would encourage you to shop Amazon for the Christmas season and use our link in the description section below. So speaking of the Chase Young situation, on the field was not very important against Maryland, shouldn't be against Rutgers, but in regards to his status, there hasn't been a whole lot of information out there, but what is the latest right now?
Ohio State's just kind of in a waiting pattern from everything I understand. They reported the violations. They held Chase Young out of the game, obviously, last week. And now they need to hear what the NCAA decides. Chase is working with the NCAA compliance people to get him reinstated as quickly as possible. There were reports over the weekend of a 4-game suspension. Ohio State then came out after the game and said that report was incorrect, that they have not been given any indication of what the suspension will be. From everything that I'm hearing, it sounds like 2 to 3 games is probably what's going to end up happening, including the Maryland game. So that would put Ohio State either getting Chase Young back against Penn State or the next week against Michigan, which seems to fit with past transgressions similar to this, receiving money, not from an agent, those type of things. But Dennis Dodd reported today from CBS Sports that Ohio State is filing paperwork to get him reinstated. To me, that just seems like Ohio State's following the procedure. I don't know if that makes any sort. You can make a judgment of if that means he'll be back sooner rather than later. But like I said, I expect total. That just seems to follow the normal procedure of what's gone on. The amount of money that Chase took, which hasn't been made public, there's been a bunch of different numbers thrown out there, and I don't want to speculate on that, but that will make a difference. Also, just Chase Young as a person, as a student, all these things are going to work in his favor. He's a good student, and the NCAA takes kind of all of that into account. He has no prior transgressions, legally or within the NCAA. So, that type of stuff is very positive for Chase, and it's just a matter of time until they make their ruling. And I think you can probably expect to hear something this week, maybe by the weekend. So if that's the case, then we'll know more here in the next 4, 5, 6 days.
Ohio State and Rutgers get together in Piscataway on Saturday. Buckeyes, of course, an enormous favorite. I don't know that Vegas even knows what to put the line at. It's at 52 right now. If you do the metrics out, it should be a zillion. They just beat Maryland by 59. Maryland beat Rutgers by 41. Do you do the math there? Obviously not. You can only score so many points, and your athletes only have so much incentive to do. In situations like this, Pat, I would love to see the result of, not in actuality do I want to see this, but it would be fascinating to see if Ohio State, a team of their caliber, had the incentive to score as much as they possibly could. Like if you said, we'll give you $100 for every point you score to each individual player, and every point you do not allow. Like if they had incentive to make this, and they would go out there and play like it was Michigan or Penn State, who knows what the score would be. But anyway, I digress, because we will have a competitive game in 2 weeks against Penn State.